This is Gemara in Gittin, Daf Ayin Test. We're holding on Ayin Chesam and Beis. We pulled up a little bit short, partially due to some technology issues, which we hope have been sorted out. But we're holding on Ayin Chesam and Beis, approximately 12 lines from the wide lines, the two dots in which we quote the Mishnah. We quote the Mishnah as saying, V'chein le'inyan kedushin, that the same din. This takes us back to the Mishnah in Chesam and Aleph, in which we said the halachais with regarding to throwing a get to a woman, karav la, safek migureshes, and the same dinim are applying for kedushin. So begins the Gemara for today. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yechon, Gittin amru v'loy l'davar acher. The Gemara begins. The Rav Asi says in the name of Rav Yechon that this halacha applies solely to Gittin, but not with regard to anything else. The Mishnah clearly articulated that this halacha is both by Gittin and by Kedushin. Says Rav Asi Amar Rav Yochanan, no, this halacha is only by Gittin. So Eisei Rav Asi, what do you do with our Mishnah? V'chein le'inyan kedushin. Answers Rav Asi, Shayni Yasam dechsevi yatzav ha'isa. It's true, but there's a special limit of yatzav ha'isa, but nowhere else. Eisvei Rav Abba continues and asks, "V'chein le'inyan achayiv." The Mishnah also said not only by kedushin, but also about achayiv. That what zarak li chayiv v'zarkolai karav lemalva zacha loive karav loive chayiv mechsal mechsa shteim yachleiku. So asks further, how can you tell me first of all kedushin? Fine, gerushin. Fine, yatzav ha'isa. What about malva? Answers the Gemara, says the Gemara, no. This case of chayv is a different nuance, and the reason is because he said explicitly, throw it to me and you're going to be potter. Says the Gemara, shkayach, if that's what he said, we have a different problem. Now what's the chiddush? If he said it explicitly, then of course that's the din. Says the Gemara, the cases in which he says, Zarik li chayvi, b'tayras gittin, that he said, throw me the get, similar to the halachas of Gittin, not just throw me the get, but rather he said that it should apply similar to Gittin. Says the Gemara, Shkayach, Vaikati ma'alememra. Nachamal, what's the chiddush? Explains the Gemara in the last narrow line, Ma'udatema. I would have thought, Matzi Amrli Mashata Nibach. It was all one big sham. Kamash Malan, that he cannot say that. And we continue on the first wide line in which the Gemara continues, going back to get. Amar Rav Chista get biyado mishicha biyadai. A new case. A first cousin to the dinim of the Mishnah. The Mishnah spoke about a case in throwing a get to an Isha, and we discussed who is it closer to is going to determine who acquires this get, or whether she will be divorced or not. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Says Rav Chista, a new din. If she is holding the get, and the Mashicha, and the string is in his hand, what's the halacha? If he's able to pull it back and grab it to himself, Eina migureshes. V'imlav migureshes. Says the Gemara, my taima, because being increasos v'leka. The reason is because the din is that again needs to be kairis, it has to sever. And if he's able to pull it back, it's not literally, there's a string attached. I wonder aloud if this is where it comes from. Either way, Amar Rav Yehuda continues the Gemara that Rav Yehuda weighs in with a similar din. I say, Yada asua katifras. V'zarka Allah, if her hand is like a slope, and he throws it to her, Aval Pisha get liyada, even though it reaches her hand, Eina migureshes. Hama, Eina migureshes. Why? We think right now the reason why Eina migureshes, because it's going to fall. Says the Gemara Shkayach, let it fall. What about our Mishnah? Amai, Okinafel Barams Didakanafel. That when it falls, it's going to land in her Dalit Amis, and therefore they should still be divorced. Says the Gemara, no. The case is b'deloi nach. It didn't come to rest on the ground. For example, Rashi says that what happened on the way down to the ground, they got consumed by a fire and never actually made it to our Dalit Amos. Says the Gemara, 1 second, she should be divorced, that it's within the airspace. Why is Dalet Amos a din in the ground? Once it's in the airspace around it, that should be enough. Tiv should debayir Rav Elazar. We should answer. We should answer up that which Rav Elazar asked. Arba Amos Amru. This din of Arba Amos, Yish len avir, ein len avir, is the din of Alan Amos within the airspace or not? So Tifshat ein len avir. This seemingly would prove to us that there's no din in the airspace; it's only on the ground. Says the Gemara, no raya achma eskin b'medes al gavanor. She's standing on top of a river. That's the reason. It's true. If it would fall into her Dalet Amos, then maybe. But if, when it was thrown to her, she's standing on top of a river, so never had the option of falling within her Dalet Amos, perhaps would be comparable if she's standing on top of a fire. I don't know how that would be possible, or maybe whatever the case would be. Then similarly, since it never had the option to fall into Rishos, that is the reason why it will not work. And we continue with the Mishnah on Ayin Tesamarav. If she is standing on top of a roof, and he, the husband, throws the get up to her. Once it reaches the airspace of the roof, if he, the husband, is on top, and she is below, and he throws her the gag, once it leaves the airspace of the roof, then nisraf, if it gets erased or burnt, still miguresh. So two different parts of the Mishnah. Part A of the Mishnah, she is on a roof, says the Mishnah, once it reaches to the airspace of the roof, she is divorced. Part B of the Mishnah says the Mishnah, if he is on the roof and she is down below, once it leaves out of his rishos, then she is divorced, even though on the way down it gets destroyed. Asks the Gemara, in the first part of the Mishnah, it said if it reaches up to the airspace of the roof, she's divorced. Why? It's not being guarded, asks the Gemara. And there's a fence. So it's considered, once it's within the airspace of the fence of the roof, therefore it's guarded by her. And that's the reason why she is divorced. Ula bar Menashe mishmei Davi miyamar. Over here, what are we discussing? Near 3, less than 3, near the roof. It's not talking about, not just that it's in the greater airspace of the roof. It's literally within 3 tvachim of the ground. And we know anything within 3 tvachim of the ground is considered like the ground itself. And that is the reason why she's divorced once it's in that airspace. And we continue with the next case of the Mishnah. What was the halacha the Mishnah taught us? The halacha was that once it leaves his airspace, she is divorced. Says the Gemara, the same kash we saw a moment ago, Valaminter is not being guarded. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, extends Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, you know what the case is? Kigayin. The lower mechitzos are greater than the upper mechitzos. So therefore, as soon as it leaves the airspace of the upper mechitzos, it's automatically within the airspace of the lower mechitzos. Envision here. Let's try to get a quick visual over here. This is the top and this is the bottom. So it's true. As soon as as soon as it leaves the airspace, the Astigmar is not being guarded. But what if the fence of this bottom area, those who are watching might understand, although this is not so good a picture. See, if the fence at the bottom is taller than the top, then the moment it leaves the top, it's within the airspace of the bottom, and that's the reason why she is divorced. Similarly, that's the reason why as soon as it leaves the airspace of the roof, that is the reason why she is divorced. Amar le Rav Abba Ula. Rav Abba says to Ula Kiman, whom does our Mishnah go like? Says the Gemara Kerebi. The Rebbe that says the Amar, again reminiscent of the Gemaras in Shabbos that we've learned, that what? Kluta kemisha hun chadamya. Anything that is contained, it's as if it's resting. And therefore, when it's contained within the walls, it's as if it's resting. And therefore, once it's within the confines, the lower walls are higher. Therefore, it's as if it's resting. And that is the reason why she is divorced. Amar le responds Zula, no. Afilu temer rabbanon, even the rabbanon could agree to this thing. Adkan lo pligi rabbanon alei de Rebbe. The rabbanon don't argue elalinian Shabbos. This is not a Shabbos thing. You don't need to have a hanacha. It doesn't actually have to be resting. Here it has to do with being guarded. And once it's being guarded by the walls, that's the reason why she's going to be divorced. Amr Rav Ziyad Rav Asi Kaman Karabi Dam Kalut Kamichon Chadam Yom Ralei Afilu Tim Rabban I cannot plead Rabban Alei the Rabbi Ella Lini Chavas Avlach Misham Inturehu Vaha Kaminta. The exact exchange explains the Gemara that over here it's a different reason than Shabbos. That's the reason everyone could agree over here, not only according to the opinion of Rebbe. Continues the Gemara. Nimchak. What happens if it gets erased or burnt on the way down? She's still divorced. Amar Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravua. Lo yishanu alash nimchak derech yirida. It's only if it got erased. It only if it got destroyed on the way downward. Avol nimchak derech aliyah. If it's on the way up, going over the fence. Loi. My time, because it's on the way up, similar to what we saw a moment ago. That mikara. Loi leminach koi. Never had a moment that it was going to be resting, similar to the case that we saw, that if she's standing on top of a river, that we said it never had a moment that it could have ever rested in a Rishah. So too over here says the Gemara, if it gets destroyed on the way up, never had a moment that it could be resting, and that is the reason why it will not work. Nisraf, if it gets burnt up, continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Ravua, 15 lines to the bottom. First one line is Bar Ravua. Lo isha, no, this thing does not apply. Elishakadam get lidileka. If she's only going to be divorced, it's only going to work if the get comes prior to the fire. Similar to the din we just saw a moment ago. Avlakadman deleka leget loy. My time because meikar l'sreifa ka'azl. Amar Rav Chisda. So now comes along Rav Chisda. After we had a nice discussion regarding what's the case that she's going to be divorced, says Rav Chisda, a new din that seemingly is unrelated. We'll see in a moment what the relationship to what we're discussing is. But says Rav Chisda, Rishuyos Chalukos Begittin. Rishuyos, different domains, different areas are considered separate with regard to Gittin. That even if it's in one area, it's not going to help with regard for other areas. Let's see what this means. Amrle Rabbi Racham Rava and Alela Sabaha. Where do you know this? Amrle Masnisani, our Mishnah. Hi, Yisayim as a Rosh Gag Bizar Klani throws turkey. We said once it goes out of his airspace, Arezu Gureshes. Now why? What's the reason? Mamaya Skinon says the Gemara. If it's his roof, a chatzar dida on it. Excuse me. If it's her roof and her chatzar, Lamali Avir Agag. Who does have to actually leave the airspace of the roof? It's all hers. So what are you going to say? Which is what we all assume. Bigag D-Day. V'chatzar D-Day. He owns both. So now once again, who cares if it leaves the airspace of the roof? Elab Shita. So what must you say? Which I'm assuming, Elab Shita. Bigag D-Da v'chatzar D-Day. It is her roof and his chatzar. That's the ratio of the Mishnah. So in the ratio of the Mishnah, when he throws it to her and she's on the roof, the reason she's divorced when it reaches the airspace of the roof, because she owns the roof and he owns the area underneath. What's the obvious kasha? The seifa of the Mishnah says the Gemara in the last narrow line. Ema seifa umel malav yelemata. What are the seifas? Says the Gemara, 1 second. If it's her roof and chatzar didei and his chatzar amay migureshes, I don't understand. Why are they going to be divorced? Doesn't make any sense. It leaves the airspace of the roof, but he's the one that owns the chatzar. Ella, what are you going to have to answer me in the second medium-sized line? Begag didei v'chatzar dida. So asks the Gemara, the obvious kasha reisha. Begag dida v'chatzar didei v'sefer begag didei v'chatzar dida. Not gishmak. So how are we going to learn the Mishnah? Elalav. So instead of learning that the Mishnah is referring to cases in which it switches Reisha to Seifa, Elalav to Oshla Makkah. And the Mishnah must be talking about a case in which the husband lends her a place to receive the get. To Oshla Makkah, the Chad Makkah Moshli Inish. Trey Makai Maislai mostly Inish, similar to the side we saw yesterday, that one does not lend to someone two places. And this is the Raya to Rav Chisda, that Rishuyos Chalukos Begittin. Amar Le Rabbi Racham responds to Rava and says absolutely not. Midi Arya Dama Kedisa Vakdisa. Reisha Begag Dida V'Chatzer Bidei V'Seifa Begag Didei V'Chatzer Dida. Rami Bar Chama is not moved by the Raya, and therefore we do not deduce any proof to the din of Rav Chisda. Continues the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom. The first wide line, Amar Rava. Shalosh Midos Begittin, the 3 characteristics with regard to Gittin, how they differ from other dinim, most notably Shabbos. The first din is, like we saw a moment ago, that Rebbe argues on the Rabbanim with regard to an airspace being contained. Says the Gemara, regarding to Gittin, also it's being guarded, it's guarded, therefore it could be a divorce. The case number 2, no, it's kind of just a Yachid V'Roishai Traskel. Chazar of Gemara and Shabbos, you put a peg in the ground, on top of the peg is a tray. V'Zarik V'Nachal Gabav, and he throws something and it lands on the tray. Even if it's 100 amos tall, chayiv, that's called an akira, and anach, it's called picking something up and putting it in a separate rishus and Shabbos. Why? Lefisha rishus hayachid oila ad lirakia. Rishus hayachid goes all the way up to Shemayim. Says the Gemara, hani midin in Shabbos, that is only a Shabbos tikkadin. Aval hacha mishum in turehu, and now it's the flip. If something is sitting on top of a pole 100 feet into the air, it's not called a mintar, it's not called garden, and therefore if such a situation was utilized for a get, they would not affect a divorce. And number 3, as we turn over to Ayin Tes Amid Beis, says the Gemara of Ahada Amar, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. And number 3 is that which Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, that what Lo Yamad Adam Begag Zeh, one should not stand on this roof. You can't stand on one roof and pick up the rain from the roof of his friend. Why? Just like below they're separate apartments, so too above they're separate apartments. And therefore Rav Huda and Shmuel teach the Chiddush with regard to Hilchos Shabbos. You cannot collect the rainwater because it's called moving from one rishos to the next. But says the Gemara, Hanimili, 4 lines down, Ayin Testament base. Le'inyin Shabbos, avlinyin get, mishum kepedo, has to do with being makbid, different rishuyos, v'kulei hai lo kapti inchi, people are not makbid on such a din, and therefore it would not work to affect the get, it would not be considered different rishuyos with regard to get. And finally, we could call this part A of today's shir with the din of Abaye. Amar Abaye. Shtei chatzeiros, on a similar vein, if I have 2 courtyards, zulaf nimizu, one inside of the next, panimi yishalai, v'chitzani yishalai. The inside courtyard is hers, the outside courtyard is his. And the outside walls are eitfais ala panimiyos, are larger than the inside walls. So she owns the inside, he owns the outside. The outside walls are taller than the inside. V'zar la, and he throws from his rishos into her rishos, from the outside to the inside. So what's the halacha? Halacha is once it reaches the airspace of the outside, which is owned by him, what is the reason? My time explains the Gemara, obviously because Penimiya's gufa, but is kamintra. If the outside walls are taller, that means that the inside is within the outside walls, and therefore it's going to be considered that is inside mashenkin bekupais, which is not true with regard to boxes. What does that mean? Shtei kupais zubesechzu. If I have 2 boxes, one inside of the another. Penimi yishalai v'chitzani yishalai. Ve'zarka Allah filu igia lavir penimius. In this case, no migareshes. My time. I think everyone, if you think about this for a moment, you'll understand the haloi nux. It's not rest. It says the Gemara, who cares? Chinach mayave. Kilev shalokech v'shas meicharu. They're boxes. One box is within the next, so the inside box is sitting inside the outside box. Explains the Gemara, we're talking about a box that doesn't have any walls, and that is the reason why it's not considered like it's sitting inside the outside box. So we're learning a chiddush over here with regard to the chatzeiros of a gittin, that as soon as it's going to be within the airspace of the outside one, it's going to be enough because hers is inside of his. Says the Mishnah about 20 lines down, Ayin Testament piece. Beis Shammai Oimrim says Beis Shammai, Paiter Adam Ishtay Beget Yashin, you're allowed to use a Get Yashin, an old get. Beis Hillel Oisrim, Beis Zeu Get Yashin. concept that we had many, many times, and now the Gemara explains what is this get. Yashan! If husband is misyached, has yichud with his wife after he writes the get to her, that makes the get into a get yashan, an old get. And such a get is a debate. Machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, whether you can use such a get. Beis Shammai says yes. Beis Hillel says no. Says the Gemara b'Maika Mifli, what is this machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel with regard to get yashan? Explains the Gemara Beis Shammai Savri Lo Amrina Gzeira Shamyam Barukita Kaidel B'na. We're not worried. We're not worried that if the date is wrong in the get, that maybe one will think that when they have a child, that the get came before the child, and therefore that child is from a forbidden union. Beis Hillel Samri, no, Amrina Gzeira Shamyam Barukita Kaidel B'na. And therefore, a get yashan will not affect the divorce, and you have to give a new get. Amar Rav Abba Shmuel. In this case, then even Beis Hillel agrees, if she remarries with this get, it's true the get is possible according to Beis Hillel. But if she takes matters into her own hands and she remarries, she doesn't have to get divorced. If she uses it, so two different ways, two different forms of the b'diavad, explains the Gemara. Either the b'diavad is that if lamaisa she goes and she gets remarried based on this get, she's allowed to stay remarried, or number two, the b'diavad is that she shouldn't have gotten divorced, but once she got the divorce, then even Beis Hillel will agree to Tinas l'chatchila, and then it's going to come out. When Beis Hillel says Eisrin, it means in the world of l'chatchila. So two different ways of learning. The machlekes Beis Shammai, the Beis Hillel, with regard to get yashan, whether arguing in the b'diavad or they're only arguing in a real b'diavad once she got remarried. And we'll pick it up in the Mishnah the next year. B'siyata dishmaya.